Hey everyone, welcome back. We're continuing our reading of the wonderful book. There it is. Alright, let's just jump on in. We're on chapter 13, and it's titled Redcoats at Monticello. It starts with a quote. Such terror and confusion, you have no idea of Governor Council. Everybody scampering. Betsy Ambler, daughter of Rebecca Burwell. Okay. This one. Lucy Elizabeth, not quite 6 months old, died at about 10 o'clock on April morning, 1781. Jefferson chose to stay with Patty the next day, declining to attend a meeting of State Council. The weather was bad in any event. Jefferson wrote his colleagues, and there being nothing that I know of pressing, and Mr. Jefferson in a situation in which I would not wish to leave her, I shall not attend today. So he chose to be with his wife instead of going to that meeting. Now, Jefferson, he's dealing with his office while he's lost yet another child. It's quite sad. So 3 of his children have died. And this is the cutie Lucy. Only 6 months old. It's quite sad. Truly. His day with Patty, as they grieved together, was a rare moment of domestic communion. Domestic communion, that sounds nice. For there were now few respites from the presses of business. By Monday, May 28, 1781, Jefferson knew a reckoning was at hand. British troops were advancing inland toward Charlottesville. These were riots over a draft for militiamen across Virginia. So, what's great also about this author is that he gives us lots of dates, which really kind of zones you in. Authors who don't put enough dates, sometimes you can, not really connect with it as much, but this author consistently has excellent dates. Was reduced to asking George Washington for the general's personal assistance. As things stood, Jefferson wrote to Washington with an inadequate militia facing British regulars. The minds of the people could conceive of no human power to ward off the inevitable victory of British forces. Wow, I wish... Oh man, imagine if they could have talked on the phone, what they would have said, and if you could just hear what they said. Very interesting. Only Washington's appearance among them, I say, would restore full confidence of salvation. So look at that. Jefferson is telling Washington that, the men need to see you. Once they see you, they're going to get rejuvenated. Think about how your leader, in a moment of crisis, is supposed to kind of like rejuvenate you, give you hope, right? Not to be like doom and gloom, the world's going to end, everything's on fire, because then a sheer panic would ensue and organization wouldn't be able to happen. And they're already facing the vast British forces. So this is interesting, and would render them equal to whatever is not impossible. So totally boost their spirits, which would help them win these contending. Jefferson wrote these words on the 28th, and he intended to stand down as governor at the expiration of his term a few days hence. As he told Washington, his long-declared resolution of relinquishing the governorship to abler hands has prepared my way for retirement to a private station. So he, wants to step down. Just lost his 3rd child, dealing with immense pressures. Wow. To speak of private stations at the end of one's burdens, what he called the labors of my office, in such an emergency does not put Jefferson in a flattering light. With the assembly on the run and the state in jeopardy, one wishes Jefferson had transformed himself into a heroic savior on horseback, rallying Virginians to the field to stop the British. Look at that. Okay, so Jefferson, you have Virginians trying to rally each other to fight the British. They need more supplies. He was not, however, a savior on horseback. The tragedy of the British invasion of Virginia in the spring of 1781 was that no Patriot leader rose to the occasion to repair Arnold, Cornwallis, or Tarleton. Cool, that's kind of cool names, man. Cornwallis, Tarleton, Arnold. It sounds very like 17th century names. The war was to diffuse The circumstances too fluid to be in anyone's control. Circumstances too fluid to be in anyone's control. Even Jefferson's, and he had devoted the previous 2 years working on the military defense of Virginia's borders. Really? So Jefferson was in charge of Virginia's borders on a defensive measure. That is another interesting fact we just learned. He spent Saturday, June 2nd, 1781, at Monticello with his family and house guests, including the speakers of the Virginia House and Senate. The lawmakers were availing themselves of Jefferson's hospitality as they waited for the legislative session, scheduled to take place in Charlottesville on Monday, June 4th. Again, do you see how just right here, bam, bam, he gives us lots of dates? Really shows you how he nerded out in his making of this book. Jefferson's successor was to be elected at this meeting. Oh, okay. Very important day then. Jefferson considered counsel to his colleagues in the government that they elect Thomas Nelson Jr., a man with political and military experience. It was time, Jefferson said, for a union of the civil and military power in the same hands. Oh, that's another interesting aspect as well, because civil and military under one hand, which means kind of like that, remains. Well, he said hands up, so yeah, that's a grouping still instead of just one person, right? A movement that the previous 2 years had taught him would greatly facilitate military measures. Unbeknownst to the party at Monticello, Cornwallis had ordered Tarleton to pursue the government to Charlottesville. Now, very few people, I think, have read a lot about Cornwallis. We should probably learn about him. Riding fast, the British dragoons passed the Cuckoo Tavern in Louisa on Sunday, June 3rd, 1781. It was late, somewhere between 9 and 10 p.m. When the British rode by, a giant of Virginia militiaman named Jack Jouett, said to be 6'4" and 220 pounds, was in Louisa. A Virginia militiaman, big old dude. Realizing that the enemy was en route to capture Jefferson, Jouett broke away for a daring nighttime ride of 40 miles. Could you imagine riding a horse for 40 miles? The pressure, going, hoping that, man, the horse shouldn't fall. Let's just keep him going. Wow. Mounted on a horse said to be the best and fleetest of foot of any nag in 7 counties. If I ever have a horse, that's what I'm going to say to people. It is the fleetest foot of any nag in all the counties of the United States of America. Jouett crashed through the wilderness. Careering through woodlands and along ridges, Jouett avoided well-known roads in order to stay clear of the enemy. Smart. According to one account, his face was cruelly lashed by tree branches as he rode forward, and scars which are said to have remained the rest of his life were the result of lacerations sustained from these low-hanging limbs. Well. We know about Paul Revere, but how many of us knew Jouett, this Virginia militiaman? Let's put his name over here. He deserves to be remembered. The British broke their march at a plantation around 11 p.m. There they rested for about 3 hours, thus giving Jouett a bit of time. Tarleton stopped again deep in the night to set fire to a wagon train of supplies en route to confronting the rebel groups. Smart. Setting fire to a wagon train of supplies. Very smart. Jouett arrived at Monticello just before dawn and told Jefferson of the impending strike. Coolly, Jefferson ordered breakfast served to the household, summoned a carriage for his family, and bade farewell to the legislators, who descended the mountain back to Charlottesville. Hattie and the 2 children and 2 slaves set out in search of safety at a nearby plantation. Interesting. So they are getting really chased. Look at that. So Jouett gets there in time to Monticello. Jefferson is warned, and he takes his family away. And notice how the author said coolly, ordered breakfast. So didn't wasn't kind of freaking out, held down the energy for his family. In HBO's series Rome, Pompey Magnus does that with his wife. And I always thought that scene was very loving, because you have to wonder, you know, how that must feel. Do you panic and run and tell them, like if there's an emergency at the door, or do you coolly do it and not scare the children, right? Traumatization and such. What a great book, man.